Welcome to day 11 in my Valentine series, and today we will be painting a flaming heart. So we'll start out with a simple outline. I'm going to organically sketch out a heart. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to cover part of it with a flame, so as long as I get the natural outline, it'll be okay. I'm loosely outlining the flames, starting a little bit small at the bottom and making it wider and taller as I go up the heart. I erased a portion of the heart, that way I could have the flames eating into it on that side, and then I'm just doing a few peaks and making my way up towards the top of the heart. I want some of the flames to be single layered and I want some to be double layered. So I'm putting some flames behind and I'm also putting lines in between to make it appear like they'll have a little bit of dimension. This top portion I'm going to make a little bit taller. I want the eye to be naturally drawn upwards, especially because that's how flames work, where at the very top it really peaks up high. And then also I'll add in some sparks that will be flying out with just a few little drops at the top and then maybe a few on the side. There's no real set pattern here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and then making sure composition wise that it's even on both sides. In the areas that seem empty, I'll add a few more flames inside. That way when I start layering, it'll create a little bit more of dimension. I used a kneaded eraser to get rid of any harsh pencil lines, and then I went in with a clear wash. For the first layer of flames, I'll be using Hansa Yellow Medium. I am diluting it a tad, but I'm still trying to keep that deep yellow tone. I like that not all of the color is consistent throughout. That way some are a little bit darker, some are a little bit lighter. It will help when I add more layers. With each new layer, I'm mixing the Hansa Yellow Medium with a touch of Pyrrole Scarlet, and I'm creating this fiery orange. I'm just touching on the outlines of the flames, and I'm using a damp brush to blend it out. Because the paper is really starting to get damp, it's becoming easier and easier to drop in color. So this next layer with a tad more Pyrrole Scarlet is going to blend out beautifully when I'm helping it along with my damp brush. Once I'm finished with that layer, it's time to completely dry it before moving on. So I'm adding even more Pyrrole Scarlet to my mixture, and I'm still having this orangey red tone, but this time I'm not outlining every single portion of the flames, and I'm just trying to highlight certain areas, concentrating more on the peaks and areas that I want to stand out. Taking one last look to see if there's areas that I want to brighten a little, and then I start moving on to the heart. The first wash is a very much diluted Pyrrole Scarlet tone, and I'll try to be even in the coverage of the heart. In an effort to make it look a little less flat, I'll use a slightly darker shade of this tone and do a V shape in the middle, blending it out with a damp brush. I want to create a shadow in the middle of the heart using a little bit of a darker Pyrrole Scarlet, and again I'll blend it out with a damp brush. I want to completely dry it before moving on to the next layer, and then I'll go in with a even deeper shade of the Pyrrole Scarlet and just kind of outline it and blending it out as I go. I'm using a damp brush to re-wet the V shape that I made in the middle, and I want to drop in some color there to deepen that shadow. Those first layers of Pyrrole Scarlet lean a little warm with an orangey tone, but now that we're deepening the shade, it's really coming into that bright red color that we want. I'm still helping the blending with a damp brush just because I don't want it to be so contrasted, even though I'll be adding another layer of Pyrrole Scarlet on top. To help the curvature of the heart, I'm dropping in some color in areas where I want it to look a little bit more rounded. I lifted a little bit of the paint on the left side of the heart, trying to create a little bit more of a highlight. I dried it, but not fully, because I still wanted to be able to drop in color, and I like this layering glazing effect. So I'm using that Pyrrole Scarlet, and I'm just going back in and filling in the entire heart. Halfway through, I'll use my brush to lift off a little bit of paint on that left side again, and then I'll use a damp brush and try to lift off certain areas that I want to be highlighted. Now I dry it completely before moving on to my next layer. I mixed a touch of raw umber into my Pyrrole Scarlet, and I'm using this darker tone to create more of that deepened shadow. I'm still using a damp brush to blend it out, and then I'll completely dry it before moving on to the next layer. I'm still using that darker tone to deepen the shadow and a damp brush to blend it out, but I don't want to overwork it before completely drying it, and then I'll add a layer of Pyrrole Scarlet over the entire heart. I'll skip over the highlighted areas, but I'll still paint it over with the Pyrrole Scarlet. I'll just use a damp brush to make sure that the layer is ultra thin. Now it's time to completely dry it before moving on to adding the final details to the flames. So now that everything has dried with the flames, I can see certain areas that I want to really pop. So I'm just adding a touch of the same Pyrrole Scarlet to the peaks of those areas, and then I'll blend it out with a damp brush. And then once I'm happy with those flames, I'll move on to the highlight. So I'm using a bleed-proof white, and I'm just adding a large highlight to the left side and a few little streaks on the right side. But I do blend out the left side with a damp brush. I just don't want it to be too much of a block. And then once you're happy with your highlight, you're done. And then this is how it looks in natural light. I hope you had fun painting with me, and I'll see you in the next video.